And this was discussed earlier, you know, why are we at this town hall meeting? It's not simply to tell you that we have a serious problem. There's been a lot of criticism in the past about the boards not including the community in its decision-making on these kinds of important issues. And this board has said we want to change that dynamic and make this an open process. So we're not going to be offering solutions. We're just going to be presenting facts and options, because we're not going to develop solutions until we have your input. So, as I said, I've been, some have asked what my background is in terms of qualifying for this kind of an issue, and I have 40 years in local government, 10 years as a community planner, and 30 years as a city manager, working in 4 different cities. I have an AA degree in architecture and a bachelor's in public administration, and I have advanced certificates from UC Berkeley, UCLA, and from George Washington University. And I have personally been involved in several billions of dollars in projects, so I have been down this path many times, although I haven't seen buildings deteriorate quite as much as these. We will outline the issues and the facts. I will try hard to stay with those. These are opinions from other professionals as well. We have those 3 buildings: the community center, which is approximately 8,000 square feet, the Hartman building, which is also known as the Greenview and Mulligan's, which is also approximately 8,000 square feet, and we have the maintenance facility, which is really 4,500 square feet. We actually had a building over where the golf buildings are now, but it was condemned by the county and we had to demolish it. And so we were left with just the auxiliary building that we have there behind the fire station. You might have noted 3 or 4 times this year that was underwater, the maintenance building. And the building was in bad shape before it was flooded, and it's in worse shape now. So the total public works facility is about 4,500 square feet. I know there's been some questions about, is this another Hartman project? Are we going to build another Taj Mahal? The only discussion the board has had is that we have a duty to either maintain or replace in kind. So the only discussion we've had is if we tear down an 8,000 square foot building, it will be replaced with an 8,000 square foot building. In the process, there's been no discussion to come up with anything other than either a complete renovation or a replacement of the buildings. These buildings have been inspected by licensed structural engineers, and costs have been developed by experienced contractors in commercial building renovation. The Hartman building has been inspected once previously by a structural engineer in the Gentry report of 2007. The community center was inspected twice previously, both in the Gentry report of 2007 and the Williams Paddock report of 2013. Those are both on the website. And the maintenance operation facility building was condemned by the county and demolished previously. We have recently had the buildings re-inspected and reviewed by an additional structural engineer, MKM Engineering, to determine the current safety status of the buildings and also to review those prior reports and see if they found deficiencies in those reports. The outcome is that they do believe those reports were a reasonably accurate reflection of the buildings at those times. In addition, the County of Lake received some complaints from residents about the building. They have subsequently gone out, inspected the building, and they have declared it an unsafe building and have red tagged it, making it illegal to occupy the building at all. The HOA is legally obligated to act on these buildings to assure that they remain safe to the community. The central question with repairing these buildings is obviously with the extent of the deterioration and the amount of repairs that will have to be done. You can imagine you reach a point where it just isn't worth repairing a building and you replace it, and that decision needs to be made in that process. There's another problem, because when you have old buildings like this, they don't have a lot of remaining useful life. Therefore, they're not valued at a high price, and particularly even when they're still in good shape, and these buildings are in terrible shape. What happens is it triggers a provision in the Uniform Building Code that says you have to bring the entire building up to current codes, 2017 codes. Our conversations with the county building department cause us to believe that is exactly what they will require. And while these buildings are in bad shape, I will also be honest with you and tell you that they're not the only assets of this homeowners association that are in bad shape. So the obvious question is, how did we get to here? How did we get to this point where our facilities, particularly 3 major buildings, are in such dilapidated condition? I will be blunt. We got here through decades of willful failure by past boards to in any way properly maintain these buildings. That's the bottom line. The same kind of decisions, I suspect, that led to our bankruptcy in the 90s. These buildings were deliberately allowed to deteriorate. The neglect was substantial in nature, and as just one example, the roof on the community center was allowed to leak for over a decade. Anybody that knows anything about buildings knows you cannot have significant water intrusion without it destroying the building, and that is exactly what has happened. Generally, the primary reason boards defer maintenance is because they don't want to face the often unpleasant task of increasing assessments. In this case, the past boards did not set up any reasonable amount for reserve funds to maintain any of the HVLA assets. Only recently has the board provided for reasonable reserve funds and started setting those funds aside. In fact, it was the funds that were set aside to effect the major repairs, starting with the roof on the community center, that led us to the problems that we now have. Because when the roofing contractors went out to inspect the roof, to give us a bid, they refused to go on the roof, believing it was too unsafe to walk on. And as a result of that input, that's when I ordered MKM to come out and look at the building, because if the roof is ready to collapse, we sure don't want it collapsing on our residents. In my opinion, there's no legitimate excuse why past boards allowed these buildings to fall into such extensive repair. They simply kicked the can down the road, and now we have run out of road. And that problem has now fallen on you, and that's where we are. Whatever the reasons, in my opinion, we now find ourselves in a position that the buildings in all likelihood cannot feasibly be restored. These are 50-plus-year-old buildings constructed to building code standards which are no longer considered safe or adequate. Because of the labor-intensive construction methods required to repair and bring an existing old building in poor condition into current code compliance, it is generally less costly to demolish the building and build a new structure. About the only time you find somebody taking a dilapidated building and restoring it is with a historical building, where the historical interest in the building exceeds the financial interest. Had these buildings properly been maintained, they would have had at least another 20 to 30 years of useful life. This failure to maintain and the cost to now upgrade or replace these deteriorated buildings forces us to decide on how to go about doing that. Whatever the decisions, either to repair or replace, it is going to be the current property owners who will bear the cost of this neglect. Having said that, and you are, as homeowners, legally obligated to pay that. So what are our legal obligations? Again, after this presentation, there will be a copy of the legal opinion set out on the table for you. I think we only have 200 copies, but it's also online. Homeowners associations are established as a business entity. Fortunately, they grant us tax-free status, so we don't pay income tax or property taxes, but we're not classified as a nonprofit or social services, which means we have a fiduciary obligation as a corporation to maintain the assets. The state law, under provisions of both the government code and the civil code, require homeowners associations to maintain its assets in good condition at all times. I think we failed that. Or to replace them in kind. In addition, our own CC&Rs and bylaws require us to maintain the properties in good condition. In addition to the law, in addition to the CC&Rs and bylaws, individual property owners have an implied warranty and entitlement to these facilities, and also have a right to expect these properties to be maintained because it affects their property values. The law does not provide for the selective riddance. You can't just close and do away with the amenities. It doesn't matter whether it's the golf course or the community center or the Greenview or the horse stables, the campground, whatever the amenities are that are here, you are legally obligated to maintain those amenities. You can't solve the problem by just tearing the building down and leaving it. You also have to, if you replace in kind. That means if you have an 8,000 square foot building, you're not allowed to replace it with a 2,000 square foot building, as an example. You have to replace in kind. So if it's 8,000, you got to replace it because that's what people have an entitlement to. Secondly, architecturally, you have to replace it in kind. You couldn't replace that building with a Quonset hut to save money. You have to replace it with something of similar architecture to do that. These issues have been litigated over and over again for decades in the California Superior Courts, and homeowners associations virtually never win. And if they do, it's usually on some legal technicality, not neglect. I have personally watched this occur in communities I've been in where it was costing homeowners associations as much as $11 million up front in smaller homeowners associations than this to solve the problem, and they were ordered to do so. This opinion comes from our law firm, Adam Sterling. That's the same Sterling that wrote the law, Davis Sterling, that regulates homeowners associations. So I do believe he probably knows what's in the law since he literally wrote it in the process. Some have suggested that the engineering reports are not valid, that they were written to say what we wanted them to say. Notwithstanding the fact that that would be suggesting that 3 separate structural engineers put their license at risk for doing so. If you just look at the buildings, I think you'll see, and we're going to show them to you in a few minutes, you'll see the problems that exist. You do have the option of not believing those reports. You know, I don't know how much more independent we can get than 3 separate structural engineers and the County of Lake independently inspecting the building and reaching the same conclusion. And I'm betting you'll kind of get to that same conclusion today when you see the building. But your risk would be if you started to make the repairs that were outlined in the MKM report at $790,000, and you discovered that in fact there were more problems behind the walls, and that we were in fact required to bring the building up to code, $790,000 is off the table. It then cost you whatever it cost you. Even if it cost you twice of what it cost, you're stuck. Or else you've started down a path you abandon and then you start new with a new building. I know that some have asked for an independent review. I don't know what that is. You know, if you don't trust the people we've hired, then no matter who we hire, I guess won't be trusted. Again, I'm going to let you look at the slides that we've taken of the building and show you the real problems from an expert standpoint. Because I know that if you walk by the building or in the building, you know, it's a little tired. It could use some work, you know, but maybe they could get it fixed up. But I think when you see really what the structural engineers were looking at, you'll clearly see those problems. Trying to bring, again, an old building like this up to code is, and the reason it's so expensive, if you can think about the community center, if that foundation does not meet 2017 codes for seismic and structure, which I guarantee you a building that old almost for certain does not, then you would literally have to physically pick that building up high enough that they can work under it or move it to another location, while they tear out the existing foundation and rebuild that foundation and then bring it back and set it on there. I think you can see that would be a lot more expensive to replace a foundation that way than just to build a new foundation in the process. Then, of course, as you set it back down, you'll have to use all new fasteners which don't exist in the existing building. A different analogy might be if you took a late 1950s car and somebody said by law you have to bring that up to all the same standards as a 2017 car with the crush zones and the collapsible bumpers and the fuel economy and the smog and everything else that is all the airbags, all of the safety features, all the computer features, if you have to make it be equivalent to a 2017 car, I think you can concede that if even possible, okay, it would cost a lot more than buying a 2017 car. And that's the same kind of problem that exists in the process. And when we say bring it up to code, remember it's the seismic codes, the structural codes, the electric codes, the plumbing codes, the mechanical air conditioning, heating codes. It's every code, the handicap codes, it's everything that you have to bring the building up to. We did go into the building and open up some sections of the wall since the MKM report was done, because we didn't do that before because we didn't know if we'd be reopening the building. The couple of places that we opened up, we found extensive structural damage due to dry rot from the water running down between the walls and pervasive black mold. When the county came in and condemned, they also condemned, I can't even send staff into that building without all of the toxic gear on because of the now open and exposed black mold in the building. So our options are to try to figure out if we want to renovate the buildings thoroughly, or whether we want to tear them down and reconstruct in-kind replacement. Now, there are three basic options on building a building. You can have a wood frame building, which runs about $350 a square foot, and we validated that by the new library that they built. That's just about what it came in, not counting all the furnishings and fixtures. You can construct the building out of masonry at about $300 a square foot, or you can construct the building out of a steel frame at about $250 a foot. Now, any of those options, the skin that you put on the outside can be whatever you want, including on a steel frame building. It can be wood, although I would advise against ever using wood again if you can avoid it, because it's very high maintenance. And if you look at our administrative building, all that wood on the side is actually concrete board, so it doesn't deteriorate as long as you keep it halfway painted in the process. Now, said differently, for replacing the community center with a similar building, wood frame would run about $2.8 million, and the masonry frame would run about $2.4 million, and a steel frame building would run about $2 million. Okay. Now, that does not include the demolition cost or the site preparation or all of the stuff you have to put back in it, like kitchen facilities and tables and chairs and all the other stuff that goes in a building. That's just for the building itself. But the good news is you have some real cost options here on the way you do it. Ironically enough, you know, we've timbered out all the prime lumber, and lumber has gotten really expensive, and steel is actually cheaper for that process. So with that, before I go into kind of some of the funding issues, I want to go through the building real quick. Again, I think if you walk around the building, you say, well, you know, it doesn't look all that bad. I mean, it seems like they should be able to fix this up, but I think you'll start seeing the problems. Okay, this is a structural timber. That is filled with dry rot. That means these bolts that are holding it to this rotted piece of lumber, in fact, aren't really supporting the building in a safe way. Okay, so this is just one example on a corner of the building on the outside. Another picture of it. You can see structural damage right here on this structural beam that's going across here, and further down in here there's evidence. You can see the separation here, and you can see the checking and all the structural damage. This is mostly caused by dry rot all through these beams here. Another picture of that section, another different section actually in that picture. This is a structural post helping hold up the building, and that's all dry rotted down there. I mean, it's not providing any real structural support like it's supposed to be. This is the walking into the restrooms. This is the leaking from the roof, coming all the way through the floors and down into the building and down through the walls. When you see that kind of exterior exposure, what's between those walls is dramatically worse. This is all bubbled, okay? This means that there's a lot of water running up and down this wall where it's actually coming out of the wall. We did tear this lower section open subsequent to this initial review, and this main corner post was completely rotted at the bottom. Completely rotted, meaning there was space underneath it, and it was just black with mold. Again, you can see another corner of the room up here that's got the same exposure of water intrusion. Another section where you can see the walls are actually doing a little buckling. This right here is termite dust, okay? That's one day. One day, every single day, our crews would go out and vacuum that up. When you see that much termite dust in the open, you have to know what's going on these walls is extensive damage. One of the problems with dry rot and termites is from the outside, the timber can look fine, but it's hollow inside, and that's the problem. And so it's not just the structural timbers now, it's all the framing timbers that are probably in serious trouble. And we have several places in the building where that's an occurrence. Again, you're looking at actual mold coming up through the flooring in the basement and up through these walls. So it's actually penetrated into the foundation itself, which actually destroys and rots the concrete, so it doesn't have its structural capacity. Next. Just more of a bathroom area and showing how even where we have the showers, this coloring here is actually the staining coming from the inside out, not the other way around. Next. Okay. This is a section of one of the roofs. That's actually plywood that is so rotted that it's pulled loose from the nails. Okay? So you can imagine the amount of water that's flowing down through all these structural timbers to get to that point. And this is all evidence of mold. Another picture of that. This is our electric cabinet, which shows water intrusion. Usually not good to mix water directly with electricity. I'm surprised and maybe saddened by the fact that it actually didn't short out and burn the building down where we could collect the insurance. Would have been a nice solution. Too late.
Don't anybody get any ideas, please.
Too late. We're now on notice, and they'll cancel us. This is an exterior wall with the windows, and you can just see everything is rotted. Everything is rotted. These windows are in jeopardy of literally falling out. These are not tempered glass. These are old glass windows. If these things actually shattered and you were there, large sheets would come down, and it would be like a guillotine. That's why they required tempered glass. So many people were seriously injured and killed by those. Another picture of that. Just a different location now, and you can see right all through here. This is structural timber. It's all rotted all the way up and down. Okay, a roof section, another roof section. This is actually pulling away from the wall. The wall is separating off the structure. This is all checking and damage from the dry rot. This post is a structural post, of which most of it is missing. Another structural post. I don't suspect that will hold a lot of weight. Really, I think in some ways we're fortunate portions of the building haven't fallen already. Again, you can see where things are actually separating because of the intense damage. The wood doesn't have enough structure for the nails to hold it. Again, another shot of different windows. This is a section of the roof that's actually rotted and fallen out. And even though some of these timbers look good on the bottom where it's painted, the dry rot doesn't always come through the paint, but the other side of those have rot. A corner of the building that shows this, lots of checking in here. More corner buildings, more rot in the structural timbers. Different window, same problem. I think we were trying to show that this glazing could fall out. The county's actually requiring that we board all of this window up because they are worried that it could fall out into the pool area and injure somebody. And so we'll be getting that done before the pool opens on June 20. Another section of the roof that's deteriorated and fallen out. This is why the roofing contractors refuse to go up there. A different section of the roof again. Another section, this is, you saw, this is another section. This is a completely different section on the other side of the building. Now, these stains in here, okay, and over in here, that's where water's been coming through the roof. A little closer look. This is a structural timber. This has dry rot, okay? So it wouldn't take a real seismic event to create a collapse of this portion of the building with this much dry rot. This is one of the cupolas, and you can see all through here the gaps, the mold, the water being allowed to completely penetrate the building and into the interior walls. This is an interior location where we're showing dry rot in the middle of the building, not just the exterior. So the roof is leaking everywhere. This is a floor, okay? This timber has so rotted and buckled, this floor is actually lifted about 4 inches, okay? That is really not safe to walk on. Another section. This is, because the upper area, which you'll see in the flyby video, this is bats. The building has several areas that are wide open that allow just about any kind of vermin you want to name to get in there. Now this is open lattice, okay, which dries pretty quick, but you can see here, the evidence that even these, where they have lots of air movement, are rotting. Same picture. Back up one. We think this is a historical artifact. That pan has apparently been there since it was constructed. Again, this is deflection in the floor on the second floor of the building. Never a good thing when you have that kind of a lift in your floor on a wood frame building. This is the kitchen facility. You can see right in the actual flooring is rotting away next to the rat traps. So. Again, the floors. You can see the actual flooring in these areas are failing from all of the water exposure. This stove, that's what that is. That's a stove. It used to be a stove. All of that rust is because of the amount of water dripping right on it from the roof, and that's stainless steel. You can see sections of the roof starting to fail. Same section. Okay. This is all black mold. Okay. That's never a good thing. This is where it's actually leaked down the cabinet and right into the base. Maybe a toilet needs some help. Again, sections of the ceiling are literally starting to fail. May have had some plumbing problems. You can see right here, this is a structural support right here, and it's failing. It's failing all around this lamping. This is mouse, not bat. Probably rat. It's too big for mouse. More damage? Okay. And let's, I think that kind of goes through most of that. Let's just do a real quick of the flyover. Now, the kind of white color you're going to see on the roof, okay, what that white color is where all the gravel and tar has coming off of the roof, and it's literally just the fibrous material, which means the water actually penetrates through those tiles now directly onto the roof and through the roof and into the building. And that's been going on for at least 10 to 12 years. And this is, all of that white you see is what that is. All of this black you see is where all of the tar and gravel are gone from the flat roof. These are those untempered glass windows. You got to love the technology. So it really, we couldn't allow anybody on the roof to do the photography, so Ben, here, our IT department, brought his drone in.
And what were those white areas again, Ron?
All of these areas are where all of the gravel and tar, that is the waterproofing, are gone, and this is just the fibers left, and the water penetrates the fibers right into the roof. And this is our great HVLA view. Again, you can see in these buildings all of the rot that's gone on, and all of that, what that really means is all of that means water is getting directly into the building. We have large spiders on the building. We were using those for security. There are trained attack spiders. Again, you can just see the place is just falling apart. Okay, it's literally falling apart. I'm so sorry for all of you that this has been allowed to happen. So. Okay, I think that's good.
I'd like to say something.
Just a minute, sir.
I'm leaving, man. I'm getting nauseated and I can't stand there watching more.
Okay, thank you.
This is one of our amenities, folks.
Sir, we have asked for decorum.
Well, let it go.
We have asked for decorum, sir. Sir, thank you very much.
Again, there will be an opportunity right after the presentation to go into questions and comments by everyone. So just give us a couple of minutes to finish up our presentation, okay? Just a couple more minutes and we'll be done. So the next section, you know, look, I'm just going to tell you the way I see it. You know, I've been at this 40 years. I don't have a dog in this fight. My contract's up June 22nd. Okay, I'm just giving you 40 years of experience in dealing with these issues because I want you to make the best decisions you can about where your future is. Now, as we get into the funding options here, I think you'll find the picture's not as dark as you might think. The board a couple of years
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The board a couple of years ago did in fact increase the amount of monies going to reserves and transferred some of their fund balances into those reserves. So there's considerably more money in those reserves than there has been in the past. The options that we have available to us for funding these three buildings, whether you renovate or whether you replace, one is to use the existing, I should first say, my estimate based on all the site prep, all the furnishings, fixtures, equipment, all of the add-ons, in addition to the base construction cost. The base construction cost of the building is about $6.5 million, but with all the other costs, I think really in the end you're looking at between 8 and 10, depending on any issues you find in the soil conditions that might require remediation as well. Using the existing reserve funding that is currently occurring within the current assessments, okay, and as you know, the current assessments have scheduled increases each year to deal with inflation and those kinds of things. that are going on. It would take between 5 and 7 years to have the funding available for these 3 buildings. The community center obviously isn't going to last 5 to 7 years because it's already condemned. The maintenance building is a very close second. The Hartman building might make 3 to 5 years before it becomes beyond continued use. And again, that's the structural engineer's assessment, not mine. So with the current schedule of reserve funding, you could do this in about 5 to 7 years. There may be some legal issues with waiting that long like the community center. Raising the assessments of the reserves $10 to $15 a month could reduce the cost of the thing so that you could get it done in 3 to 5 years. So a small increase in assessments could generate enough cash flow to deal with the problem in a period of time that I think is reasonable. You could levy a special assessment to deal with the front-end cash problems. That would likely be several $100s for each lot. You could use a form of, and I'll call it bridge loan, meaning from the time you start construction till you have enough money to pay for it, you would borrow that gap in your cash flow. That loan would probably be about a 6 to 7 year loan, and then at the end of that it would be paid off, and your assessments could be engineered in a way where they'll automatically drop after that time, the idea being that the monthly cost of that will be less than a single assessment. You could also do a long-term loan, a 25 to 30-year loan, and use the money that was going to go into the reserves for the replacement over time, adjusted for any of those additional costs, to pay the loan. It would be perfectly appropriate to use that source of funds. Now, I don't want to, whether it's the reserve fund or whether it's the operating budget, it's still your same assessment. It all comes out of that. But again, the reserves are anticipating these costs over a longer period of time, and so the idea of a longer term loan would be to spread that cost on a monthly basis, just like when you finance a car or a house, and that would be a much lower rate. You do end up paying interest on that. And then, of course, option 6 is that you would use some combination of these. I think our goal in looking at this with our financial consultants was to try to provide some options that, when combined, could keep any impact on assessments to an absolute minimum. But I don't think you have to look at a $2,000 or a $3,000 assessment to make this happen, and I don't think you have to look at your assessments going up several $100s a year. I think that the good news is that we can do this in a reasonable period of time without unnecessary burdensome impacts, depending on how well we stage it, and if we take advantage of the lower construction cost of, say, a metal frame building or something. One advantage that I will throw out for replacement is that you can repurpose the building. If you take the community center, if any of you have been to the main room there, I don't know what the architect was thinking when he put those structural posts right in the middle of the room, but it sure takes away from its usability. You could also make that space a little bit larger so that you could have a meeting like this in your own place. And also have a space for banquets and stuff where you actually can generate some revenues to help offset these costs. So what are our next steps? Okay, first, number 1, make a decision on which buildings will be repaired and which will be replaced. 2, make a decision on which construction type, if you do replace any buildings, which construction type you want, wood, steel, or masonry. Determine the sequence in which buildings will be restored or replaced. Determine a new location for the maintenance operation out of the floodplain. Never good to have a primary building that you need to respond to flooding be flooded. If the community center is to be replaced, demolish the current building so it does not present a safety threat or damage to the pool area. If it is renovated, we'll have to figure out a way to barricade it so that it remains safe during that use. Determine your financial options to be used to restore or replace the buildings. 7, determine the best uses and layout for activities within each building. 8, secure the cash or financing for each of the projects at the appropriate time. 9, develop the bid documents for the building's restoration or replacement. Identify responsible bidders, submit the project for bids, award construction contracts, and repeat the design and bid process for each building as it comes due. So your buildings are really, to summarize, your buildings are in really bad shape, in my opinion, based on my experience and having worked in that industry, probably beyond being able to financially, feasibly repair. But that's my opinion. It is validated by 3 separate structural engineers. So I think you are confronting that kind of reality. That's not all bad news, because you also get to fix some of the mistakes that are in those existing buildings. Again, if it's 8,000 feet, it gets replaced with 8,000 feet. Second, I think you have some reasonable financial options that don't necessarily say you're going to be unduly burdened by all of this, because we actually started accumulating some pretty good cash flow over the last 2 or 3 years. And the final thing I'm going to make from my perspective, pretty much no one around here is really responsible. Over a 40-year period, this was allowed to happen. Over a 40-year period. So lots of people made bad decisions for whatever reasons that led us to here. But legally, we don't have a choice. We have to do something. I understand that people often feel, well, I don't use the pool, or I don't use the community center, or I don't golf. That's not the concept of amenities. And the reason Boise Cascade built all of the amenities is different people have different likes. So not all the people use the pool, but some of the people do. Not all the people golf, but some of the people do. But I can assure you that your property values, when a real estate broker is marketing your property, is appreciably improved by having a menu of amenities, because you have a much broader buying market than if you just have one amenity. Our obligation corporately, our fiduciary obligation, is to protect your property values. That's our obligation to you through protecting your assets that you control. This homeowners association is not a common interest, property interest. You don't own an unequal share in the building. The corporation owns the properties. You own the corporation. So you're like a stockholder. So that concludes my report.
All right, Rod, thank you very much. That was a very thorough and very sobering report. But it's what we need to know to really move forward. Everyone needs to understand what we're facing, and we need to deal with it together and derive a consensus as to how we're going to proceed.